In the cold silence beyond the Andromeda system's outer rim, where stars blinked like distant memories and space stretched empty for light years, a small salvage tug named Orion's Reach drifted slowly through the void. Its crew of 4 had spent weeks scanning asteroid belts and dead comets for anything worth hauling back to New Haven Station. Captain Daniel Briggs stood at the main viewport, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the flickering sensor readout that had just pinged an anomaly. It wasn't metal-rich rock or a derelict freighter like they usually found. This was something massive, unnaturally still, unnaturally old. "Bring us closer," Briggs said, his voice low but steady. He wasn't a man who got excited easily, but something about the shape on the screen tugged at his gut. It looked like a ship, but unlike any he'd ever seen. No smooth curves or sleek Concorde design. This thing was jagged, layered, almost organic in its structure, like it had grown rather than been built. Lisa Morgan, the team's analyst, leaned over the console beside him, her fingers dancing across the screen. "Mass estimate is off the charts," she murmured. "At least 3 times bigger than a Concorde cruiser. And it's not emitting any power signature. Nothing. Like it's been dead for centuries." Chris Delgado, their engineer, whistled from the back. "Either it's a tomb or a trap. Maybe both." Marcus Bell, the youngest of the group and their comms officer, adjusted his headset. No distress calls, no ID beacon, no alien chatter on any known frequency. "It's just—" There, Briggs made the call. "We're going in." The Orion's Reach crept forward until the object filled the viewport. It loomed like a mountain carved from black stone, its surface scarred with craters and strange markings that shimmered faintly under their floodlights. Some of the symbols looked almost human, angular, deliberate, but none matched any known language. Vines of crystalline material ran along its hull, pulsing with a soft blue light that faded the moment they got too close. For 2 days, they circled the vessel, scanning every inch. They found no airlocks, no visible engines, no weapons ports, just silence and age. When they finally spotted a seam in the hull, a possible entry point, Briggs suited up with Lisa and Chris. Marcus stayed behind to monitor systems and keep watch. Inside, the air was stale but breathable, as if the ship had sealed itself perfectly against time. Gravity was weak but present, pulling them gently toward the floor. The walls were lined with smooth panels that glowed when touched, casting long shadows down corridors that twisted like roots through stone. There were no bodies, no signs of recent life, only dust, silence, and the occasional hum from deep within the ship's bones. Lisa ran her scanner over a wall glyph. "This isn't alien," she said, her voice tight with disbelief. "It's proto-human, pre-Exodus, maybe even older." Chris frowned. "That's impossible. Humans didn't have FTL back then. We barely had fusion. Unless," Lisa said slowly, "they weren't the humans we think we know. They found a central chamber, a circular room with a raised dais in the center. On it sat a single console, dark and cold. When Chris brushed his hand over it, a ripple of light spread outward, and for a heartbeat the entire room lit up with images. Star maps, battle scenes, fleets clashing in silent fury. Then it vanished, leaving them blinking in the dim. Back on the tug, they debated what to do. Reporting it meant handing it over to the Galactic Concorde, who would likely declare it a hazard and order it scrapped. But something about the ship felt important, sacred even. When they returned to New Haven Station, the news spread fast. Concorde officials arrived within hours, led by Administrator Vance, a sharp-eyed man with little patience for mysteries. He reviewed their scans, listened to their report, and then laughed. "An ancient human warship," he said, shaking his head. "You expect me to believe Earth built something like that before we even left the solar system? That's myth. Fairy tales for kids." The Concorde Council met in secret and voted unanimously. The vessel was to be towed to the scrapyard and dismantled. Too risky to keep, too strange to study. Within days, holofeeds across the sector were mocking the discovery. "Earth's latest ghost ship," one headline read. "Salvage crew finds space junk and calls it history," joked another. Memes flooded the networks. Cartoons of cavemen piloting star destroyers, jokes about Grandpa's old battleship. Briggs watched it all from the mess hall of the station, jaw clenched. Lisa sat beside him, arms crossed. "They don't understand," she said quietly. "That ship knew we were human. It responded to us." Chris joined them, dropping into a chair. "They're tearing it apart tomorrow, cutting it into chunks for recycling. Marcus stood in the doorway holding a data pad. I just got word. The Concord's sending a full security detail. They're not taking chances. Briggs looked out the window at the distant shape of the warship, now tethered to a massive crane arm near the scrap docks. It looked small from here, helpless, but he remembered the hum in its corridors, the way the light had risen at their touch. It wasn't junk. It was waiting. He turned to his crew. We can't let them destroy it. Lisa nodded without hesitation. It's ours, whether they believe it or not. Chris rubbed his hands together. If we're doing this, we do it tonight. Before the cutters arrive. Marcus swallowed hard but didn't back down. I'll fake a comms glitch. Give us a 3-hour window, Briggs stood. Then we move fast, quiet, and we don't look back. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. But inside the old warship, deep in its heart, something stirred. Just a whisper of power, a single pulse in the dark. As if it had heard them. As if it had been waiting for this moment all along. The night shift on New Haven Station was always quiet. The corridors dimmed and the docking bays nearly empty. That made it perfect for what Daniel Briggs and his crew planned to do. They moved like shadows through the maintenance tunnels, avoiding the main paths where Concord security patrols walked their rounds. Lisa carried a satchel of data drives and bypass tools. Chris had a portable power coupler slung over his shoulder, and Marcus kept one ear on his headset, feeding them updates from the station's internal comms. The ancient warship hung motionless in Dock 7, tethered by thick magnetic clamps and surrounded by floating drones that scanned its hull for salvage points. A Concorde cutter hovered nearby, its crew already suited up for morning demolition. But for now it was just them, the void, and the silent ship. They reached an access hatch on the lower hull, one they'd marked during their first visit. Chris worked quickly, overriding the manual release with a jury-rigged signal from his wristpad. With a soft hiss, the hatch slid open, revealing the same dark corridor they'd walked before. They slipped inside without a word. Inside, the air felt different, charged like before a storm. The walls glowed faintly as they passed, reacting to their presence. Lisa ran her hand along a panel and glyphs flared to life, shifting and rearranging as if trying to speak. "It's learning us," she whispered. Recognizing our patterns, they made their way toward the central chamber, moving fast but careful. Every step echoed too loudly in the stillness. Marcus kept watch at the rear, his eyes darting down side passages. "We've got maybe 90 minutes before the cutter crew does their final sweep," he said. In the heart of the ship, the dais stood just as they'd left it. Chris set down his gear and plugged the power coupler into a port near the base. "This thing's got a quantum core," he said, eyes wide as the readout flickered to life. "Not just any core, it's self-sustaining. Been running on residual energy for who knows how long." Lisa knelt beside the console, connecting her datapad. "The logs are fragmented, but I'm pulling what I can." Lines of text scrolled across her screen, dates, coordinates, battle reports. One phrase repeated like a mantra. "Children of Saul, stand ready." "Saul," Marcus said. "That's our son. It really is human." Briggs watched them work, his mind racing. He'd spent his whole life hauling scrap, fixing broken things, never believing in legends. But this ship felt alive in a way he couldn't explain. It wasn't just metal and wire. It was memory, purpose. Lisa suddenly gasped. "Look at this." She turned her pad so they could see. A star map unfolded, showing Earth, Mars, the belt, and then lines stretching outward to colonies lost during the Exodus Wars, over 10,000 years ago. One line led straight to this spot in Andromeda. "This ship wasn't exploring," she said. "It was retreating, hiding, waiting for us to find it." Chris tapped a symbol on the console. A hidden panel slid open beneath the dais, revealing a sphere of swirling blue light, crystalline, humming, pulsing like a heartbeat. "The core," he breathed. "It's intact." Before they could react, alarms blared through the station outside. Red lights flashed on Marcus's wristpad. "They know we're here," he said, voice tight. "Security just locked down the dock. They're sending a team." Briggs didn't hesitate. "Power it up, now." Lisa's fingers flew across her pad, uploading a bootstrap sequence she'd cobbled together from the ship's own code. "It's not designed for modern interfaces," she said. "But if I mimic the biorhythm patterns from our first scan..." Chris linked the coupler directly to the core chamber. "I can feed it a surge from the tug's reactor. It'll be risky, but it might wake the main systems." Marcus moved to the entrance, pulling out a handheld scanner. I'll jam their signals as long as I can. Outside, thrusters roared as Concorde shuttles approached. Voices crackled over distant comms. Unauthorized entry confirmed. Prepare to board. Inside the ship groaned. Not a sound of breaking metal, but of something ancient stretching after a long sleep. The walls brightened. Floor panels lit up in sequence, leading deeper into the vessel. The core pulsed faster, its hum rising to a steady thrum that vibrated in their chests. Lisa's pad beeped. It's accepting the sequence. Systems coming online, life support, navigation, internal comms. She looked up, eyes wide. It's asking for a command. Briggs stepped forward. He placed his palm flat on the console. Wake up, he said simply. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire chamber flared with light. A voice, calm, clear, neither male nor female, filled the air. Identity confirmed. Captain Daniel Briggs. Crew recognized. Welcome home, children of Sol. The ship shuddered. Magnetic clamps outside snapped open as internal gravity fields reasserted control. Alarms screamed across the dock as the warship broke free, drifting slowly but surely away from the crane arm. Hold on, Chris yelled as the floor tilted. Artificial gravity stabilized, but the view through a nearby viewport showed Concorde shuttles scrambling to intercept. Marcus checked the comms. They're hailing us, demanding we stand down. Briggs looked at his crew. We're not standing down. We're leaving. Lisa pointed to a new display that had appeared on the wall, a star chart with a single route highlighted. It's showing us a jump point, near the Helios belt, safe zone. Chris worked the console with growing confidence. Engines are primed. Shields at 10% and climbing, weapons offline, but the core's routing power to defense. The warship turned, slow and majestic, its hull absorbing the glare of station floodlights. Concorde shuttles opened fire, but energy bolts fizzled against a newly formed barrier that shimmered like liquid glass. Inside, the crew stood together on the bridge they hadn't even known existed until now. A wide, circular room with a panoramic view of space. Stars stretched endlessly before them. Behind New Haven Station shrank into the distance. They'll call us thieves, Marcus said quietly. Let them, Briggs replied. This ship didn't belong to them. It belonged to us all along. As they approached the jump point, the core pulsed one last time and the ship vanished in a ripple of light. On the station, officials stared at empty screens. On the networks, the mockery turned to confusion, then fear. Because the ghost ship wasn't a myth anymore, it was real. And it had chosen its crew. The jump left them breathless. One moment they were near the Helios belt. The next they hung in silent space above a quiet star system no one had charted in centuries. The warship drifted gently, its hull still humming with that low, steady thrum that felt less like machinery and more like a heartbeat. Inside, the crew stood on the bridge, staring at the view screen as data scrolled across it in soft blue lines. None of them had slept. None of them wanted to. Lisa studied the ship's logs, now flowing freely into her pad. It's calling itself the Vigil of Sol, she said. Not just a name, a mission. It was built to watch over human colonies during the Exodus Wars. When the fleets fell, it went dark. To wait. Chris ran diagnostics from a side console, eyes wide at what he saw. This thing runs on something we don't even have names for. The core isn't just power, it's memory, navigation, defense, all woven together. Like it thinks. Marcus monitored external signals. No Concorde ships nearby. But chatter's heating up. They're calling us pirates now, saying we stole a weapon of mass destruction. Briggs leaned against the command rail, arms crossed. Let them talk. We didn't steal anything. We answered a call. The ship seemed to agree. Panels lit up without being touched. Doors opened before they reached them. Even the air smelled cleaner, sharper, like ozone after rain. It wasn't just responding to commands, it was anticipating them. They spent the next hours learning. Lisa decoded more of the glyphs, finding crew manifests, battle orders, even personal logs from officers long gone. Chris mapped the engine layout, discovering that the ship didn't use fuel in the traditional sense. It pulled energy from quantum fluctuations in space itself. Marcus found the comms array could tap into subspace layers no modern system could reach, letting them hear whispers from across the galaxy. Then the AI spoke again. Not through speakers, but directly into their minds, a soft voice, calm and ancient. You are untrained. But you are worthy. I will guide you, Briggs didn't flinch. Who are you? I am the Vigil. I remember Sol. I remember Earth. I remember when humanity stood alone against the void and won. Before they could ask more, alarms chimed softly. Marcus stiffened. Incoming priority alert. From Epsilon Colony, he pulled up the feed. Grainy footage showed smoke rising over domes, shattered comms towers, and Krell warships hovering in low orbit. The Krell, a brutal empire that had been pushing into human space for years, were attacking. Not raiding, conquering, and Epsilon had no defenses, no army. Just farmers, teachers, children. Lisa's hands trembled as she read the message. They're broadcasting a final plea. No one's answering. The Concord says it's too far. Too risky. Briggs looked at the view screen, then at his crew. We're not too far. Chris shook his head. We don't even know how to fire the weapons. What if we get there and can't do anything? The ship answered for them. A new display appeared. Tactical overlay of Epsilon system. Enemy positions marked in red, friendly outposts in green, and a single route glowing gold leading straight to the colony. The AI's voice returned. The vigil was made for this. To protect, to endure. To strike when darkness comes. Briggs didn't hesitate. Set course for Epsilon. Maximum speed. The ship obeyed. Engines flared, not with fire, but with rippling waves of distorted space. Stars stretched into lines as they jumped again, faster than any Concorde vessel could manage. Inside, the crew held on as gravity shifted. Time bent, and the void blurred around them. They arrived in chaos. Krell destroyers circled Epsilon like vultures, bombarding the surface with plasma cannons. Fires burned across the main settlement. Evacuation ships were being picked off one by one. On the ground, people ran for shelters that wouldn't hold. Briggs gripped the rail. What do we do? Lisa pointed to a symbol on the console, a targeting reticle. I think... You just will it. He closed his eyes, focused on the nearest Krell ship, and thought, stop them. The Vigil of Sol responded instantly. A beam of silver light lanced out from its bow. Not fire, not energy, but something stranger. It struck the Krell destroyer, and instead of exploding, the ship froze. Its systems shut down. Its weapons went dark. Then slowly it began to break apart. Not from damage, but as if time itself unraveled around it. What was that? Marcus whispered. Temporal lance, Lisa said, reading the data. It doesn't destroy the ship, it ages it. Thousands of years and seconds. More Krell ships turned toward them, weapons charging. Chris shouted, shields at 60%. We can take a few hits, but not a full barrage. Briggs didn't flinch. Then we don't let them fire. He focused again, this time on the swarm of fighters peeling off from the capital ship. The Vigil released a cloud of tiny drones, no bigger than birds, made of the same crystalline material as the core. They darted through space, latching onto enemy hulls. Where they touched, Krell shields flickered and died. Then the drones exploded, not with fire, but with pulses that scrambled every circuit on board. The Krell panicked. Their comms filled with frantic shouts and a guttural tongue. One by one, their ships went dark or veered off course. Then the capital ship fired, a massive plasma beam meant to vaporize the Vigil. But the warship moved faster than it should have, twisting sideways as if space bent to let it pass. The beam missed, scorching empty space. Briggs felt something then, not fear but clarity. The ship wasn't just a tool. It was a partner. And it remembered how to fight. He placed both hands on the console. Finish it. The Vigil unleashed everything. Temporal lances carved through destroyers. Drone swarms disabled fighters. And from its aft, a wave of energy pulsed outward. Not destructive, but cleansing. It reset local gravity, knocked out enemy comms, and gave the evacuation ships a chance to escape. Within minutes, the Krell fleet was in full retreat, limping back to their territory. Below, the fires on Epsilon still burned, but the bombing had stopped. Survivors looked up at the sky, seeing not a Concorde rescue, but an ancient warship hovering like a guardian. On the bridge, the crew stood in silence, exhausted, shaken, changed. Marcus broke the quiet. They're hailing us. From the colony, Briggs nodded. Put it through. A woman's face appeared on screen, dirty, tear-streaked, but alive. Thank you, she said, voice breaking. Who are you? Briggs looked at the ship around him, then back at her. We're human, and this is our ship. As the transmission ended, the AI spoke one last time that day. The Vigil has returned, and the galaxy will remember. News of the battle at Epsilon spread faster than any ship could fly. Within hours, every human colony from the belt to the outer veil had seen the footage. Grainy, shaky, but undeniable. An ancient warship, black as night and glowing with blue veins of light tearing through a Krell fleet like it was made of paper. No conquered insignia, no modern markings. Just power, precision, and purpose. People called it a miracle. Others called it a warning. But everyone called it human. On New Haven Station, Administrator Vance watched the broadcast with a pale face. He'd ordered the Vigil of Sol scrapped. Now it had saved thousands. His superiors in the Conquered Council were furious, not at the Krell, but at him. "You let them take it," one official hissed over secure comms. "Now Earth has a weapon we can't control." But Earth wasn't celebrating, not yet. Because the Krell weren't done. Deep in their empire, the High Warlord Korax sat in his obsidian throne room, surrounded by shattered hull fragments from his lost ships. His advisors trembled as they reported the loss. It was not a new design, one whispered. It matched the legends. The Ghost of Sol, the ship that broke our ancestors at the Battle of Crimson Reach. Korax's eyes burned with cold fire. That ship was erased from history, burned from every archive. How does it return now? A scarred veteran stepped forward. Because they found it. The humans. And they woke it up. Korax stood. Then we do not wait. We do not raid. We erase Epsilon completely. And we hunt the ghost until it is dust. Within a day, a new Krell armada assembled. Bigger, darker, armed with planet cracker missiles and gravity mines. Their target wasn't just Epsilon this time. It was every human world along the frontier. And at its heart flew Korax's own command vessel, the Fang of Vengeance when built to kill legends. Back aboard the Vigil of Sol, Briggs and his crew knew something was coming. The ship's sensors picked up unusual energy spikes near Krell space. Lisa cross-referenced old war logs. "They're scared," she said. This ship didn't just beat them. It reminded them of a defeat they tried to forget. Chris checked the core. "We're at full power now. Shields, weapons, everything. But we can't fight an entire armada alone." Marcus tapped into encrypted Krell channels. "They're moving fast. ETA to Epsilon, 36 hours. And they're not stopping at Epsilon. They're hitting 3 colonies in a row." Briggs stared at the star map. 3 worlds, millions of lives, and no conquered fleet within range. Then we meet them before they get there. The Vigil jumped again, not to Epsilon, but to the narrow corridor between Krell space and the human frontier, a place called the Shattered Belt, where asteroids and dead stars made navigation deadly. Perfect for an ambush, they arrived early. The ship cloaked itself not with invisibility, but by bending light and sensor waves around its hull. To outside eyes, it simply wasn't there. For hours, they waited. The crew ate cold rations, checked systems, and tried not to think about what would happen if they failed. The AI remained silent, as if conserving strength. Then the Krell came. Not in neat formation, but in a storm of metal and fire. Over 50 ships led by the massive Fang of Vengeance, its hull bristling with weapons that glowed red-hot. They moved like a pack of wolves, confident, cruel. Briggs took a deep breath. Now, the Vigil dropped its cloak. It struck first at the rear, temporal lances slicing through supply carriers, aging them into rust before they could react. Drone swarms poured out, disabling engines and comms on frigates. The Krell scrambled, confused. Where was the enemy? How were they hitting from nowhere? Then the Vigil turned on the main force. Korax roared orders from his bridge. "Find it. Kill it." But the warship danced between their shots, using asteroid fields as cover, striking and vanishing. Each hit weakened the Krell formation. Shields failed. Ships collided in panic. Briggs didn't just fight, he learned. With every move, the Vigil fed him data, showed him weak points, predicted enemy paths. It was like the ship remembered every battle it had ever fought, and now it was teaching him. Lisa called out, "The Fang is powering up its main cannon. It's aimed at Epsilon. Even from here it can fire," Chris cursed. "If that beam hits, the colony's gone." Briggs didn't hesitate. "Then we stop it before it fires." The Vigil surged forward, straight at the Krell command ship. Krell fighters swarmed to intercept, but the warship released a pulse, a shockwave of distorted time that froze them mid-flight. They hung in space like statues, then shattered. The Fang opened fire. Beams the size of cities lanced out. The Vigil twisted, shields flaring white-hot, but held. It closed the distance fast. Inside the Krell ship, Korax watched in horror as the ancient vessel loomed larger on his screen. "Impossible," he growled. "That ship died 10,000 years ago." On the Vigil's bridge, Briggs placed his hands on the console. "Finish it," the core blazed. From the bow, a single beam brighter than a star shot forth. Not a temporal lance, not a drone, pure quantum energy, focused into a point smaller than a grain of sand. It pierced the Fang's armor like paper, struck its reactor, and triggered a chain reaction that unraveled the ship from the inside out. The Fang of Vengeance didn't explode. It collapsed, folded in on itself, then vanished into a silent implosion. The remaining Krell ships broke formation. They fled, not in retreat but in terror. Silence returned to the shattered belt. On Epsilon, people watched the sky and saw no incoming doom, only stars. And somewhere out there, a guardian. Back on the bridge, Marcus let out a shaky breath. "We did it," Lisa shook her head. "No, the ship did it. We just showed up." Briggs looked out at the drifting wreckage. "Then we make sure it never has to do this alone again." As if in answer, the AI spoke softly. "The Krell feared us because we once stood united. Now they will fear us again." And far away on a dozen hidden worlds, other dormant signals flickered just for a second, as if waking to the call. In the weeks after the battle at the Shattered Belt, the galaxy changed. The Krell Armada did not return. Their border patrols pulled back. Entire sectors once under threat fell quiet. Rumors spread that High Warlord Korax had been stripped of his title, his failure seen as a curse from the old gods. But the real shift happened among humans. For the first time in generations, they stood a little taller. They spoke of Earth not as a backwater, but as the cradle of something ancient and powerful. And at the center of it all floated the Vigil of Soul. No longer a ghost, but a symbol. The Galactic Concord called an emergency summit. Administrator Vance, once so sure of his authority, now sat at the far end of the table, silent and pale. Representatives from every human colony demanded answers. Why had the Concord tried to scrap the ship? Why had they ignored Epsilon's plea? And most importantly, what else had they hidden from humanity? Briggs and his crew were summoned not as fugitives but as honored guests. They arrived aboard the Vigil, which docked not at a scrapyard but at the Concord's central platform, where crowds gathered just to see it. Children pointed. Elders wept. Soldiers saluted. Inside the council chamber, Briggs stood before the assembly. He wore no uniform, just a simple jacket, but his voice carried weight. "We didn't steal this ship," he said. "We found it, and it found us. It's not a weapon. It's a reminder that we were never weak. We just forgot." Lisa presented the logs, proof that the Vigil and others like it were built by early human explorers during the Exodus Wars, when Earth's children scattered across the stars to survive. They weren't primitive. They were pioneers. And they left guardians behind, hidden in dead systems, waiting for their descendants to grow strong enough to reclaim them. The council had no choice. They issued a formal pardon. They declared the Vigil of Soul a protected heritage vessel. And they approved a new initiative, Project Legacy, led by Briggs, Lisa, Chris, and Marcus, with full access to Concord archives and deep space scouts. But the real work began quietly, far from politics. The crew returned to the Vigil, now moored at a newly built orbital dock above Earth. From the bridge, they could see the blue curve of their home planet, clouds swirling, oceans gleaming, cities glowing at night. It looked small, fragile, but also full of promise. Chris spent his days mapping energy signatures from old star charts. "There are at least 7 more Vigil-class ships out there," he said one evening, pointing to blinking dots on a screen. "One near the Orion Nebula, another in the ruins of Proxima's third ring." Lisa worked with historians, translating more glyphs, uncovering names of lost captains, songs sung on long-dead decks, promises made to protect the future. They didn't build these ships to win wars, she realized. They built them to make sure we'd have a tomorrow. Marcus coordinated with colonies, setting up listening posts tuned to the same frequency the Vigil used. "We're not just looking," he explained. "We're calling. And I think they're starting to answer." One night, as Earth's sun dipped below the horizon of the orbital dock, Briggs stood alone on the bridge. The ship was quiet but not empty. The core hummed softly like a lullaby. The AI spoke, not in commands, but in warmth. "You have remembered." "That is enough." Briggs placed a hand on the console. "We're just getting started." As if in reply, a signal blinked on the comm screen, faint, distant, but clear. It came from the direction of the Cygnus Rift, a pulse of light matching the vigil's rhythm. Then another, from the edge of the Scorpius cloud, and another near the ruins of old Mars. They weren't random, they were responses. The other vigils were waking. News of the signals spread fast, not through official channels, but through whispers, through songs, through hope. Colonies began sharing resources, building new ships based on recovered designs, teaching their children the old stories, not as myths, but as history. The Krell watched from afar, silent now. They had learned the hard way that humanity was not what they seemed, that beneath the quiet colonies and trading posts lay a legacy of fire and steel, waiting to rise again. Back on the bridge, the crew gathered one last time before their next jump. No orders, no missions, just purpose, Lisa smiled. "Where to first?" Briggs looked at the star map, at the blinking lights calling from the dark. "Wherever they need us." The vigil of Sol powered up, its core blazing brighter than ever. Engines hummed. Shields shimmered. And as it lifted from the dock, people on Earth looked up and saw not just a ship, but a promise kept. The AI's voice filled the bridge one final time that day, calm and certain. "The vigil never sleeps. It only waits for its people to remember." And across the galaxy, in silent systems and forgotten orbits, other hearts began to beat again.